That ship shouldn't exist. Captain Ralveth's voice sliced through the command deck like a sudden descent, not raised but honed. He stood with both hands on the edge of the nav console, eyes locked to the central heads-up display where a grainy rotational feed looped the target again and again. On screen, the derelict hull loomed. Its design was unmistakably Terran, but nothing in Vecran military archives matched the configuration. Lieutenant Harvin glanced up from his telemetry station, jaw tight, scales along his neck twitching. Confirmed registry ping, Earth origin, designation ESV-77, Vanguard. Status? Cold, Harvin replied, tapping the keys hard enough to echo. No thermal output, no life signatures, no comms, no reactor flare. Dead steel in vacuum, possibly a wreck from the sovereign conflict. Ralphieth exhaled slowly. Sovereign conflict. That war had ended a century before his father was born. Nothing from that era should still be floating, let alone transmitting registry. Behind them, dry heat hissed from the ventilation ducts. The bridge lights dimmed slightly under automated energy cycling, but no one moved. Even the air tasted wrong, too filtered, too still. The graveyard wasn't supposed to answer back. I want a closer look, Ralph said. Scrap it, if it's drift. Sir, this is Helion, murmured Ensign Kovar from communications. We're still within the graveyard perimeter, no beacon zone. Technically, we're not activating anything, just a collection op. Ralpheth turned, and the deck hushed under his voice. Whatever Earth left here, it's been forgotten. If they cared, they'd have cleared it themselves. Prep the extraction group. No one volunteered a response. Orders stood. Within 20 minutes, 2 frigates detached from the Vecran patrol line and adjusted their vector toward the drifting ship. The grav stabilizers engaged with a low groan through the hull. In the viewing gallery aft of the bridge, the structure of the graveyard revealed itself in fuller dread. A lattice of old satellite husks, fractured torpedo shells, skeletal outposts, all caught in slow, useless orbit around a dead relay planet. And in the center, the Vanguard is floated without spin. Its surface was dulled, not scorched, coated in layers of oxidized microshrapnel from forgotten battles. No windows, no beacons. Only a long incision down its starboard, sealed over by patch metal that looked like it had been melted into place, not repaired. Ralveth stepped toward the viewport, eyes narrowing. Why is a wreck sealed shut from the outside? The tactical officer hesitated. Impact shielding? Emergency armor? From whom? The comm cracked. Frigate 1, en route. 50 clicks and closing. Any change in ship posture? No, sir. Same vector, same silence. They watched in stillness as the extraction team drew closer. Frigate 1's hull lights illuminated the front plating of the Vanguard. For the first time, the ship's name was visible, embossed not in paint or stencil, but carved, deep, as if Earth hadn't wanted it to be forgotten. Ralph's voice lowered. Why does a salvage vessel carry reinforced point defense bays? No record indicates it's a salvage vessel, sir. Then why the Earth registry? That was the last sentence spoken before the scout vessel's signal cut. Not jammed. Not intercepted. Gone. The deck erupted. Harvin slammed comms override. Frigate 1, repeat last. Ralveth spun to tactical. Launch the second ship. Visual recon sweep, hull cameras on wide band. The second frigate adjusted course following a safer arc, external sensors on high capture. The screen updated in real time. Vanguard still hadn't moved, not by a single degree, but something had changed. Look at the dust, muttered Ensign Kovar. Ralpheth focused. The area around Vanguard had shifted. The debris field, the light filaments of suspended microparticles drifting near all the other wrecks, was gone, cleared in a sphere, as if the space around the ship rejected it. Frigate 2, Ralveth barked. Pull back 10 clicks, do not cross the buffer. But it was too late. The ship vanished from sensors, One blink it was there, the next, gone. No impact, no light, no sound. Harvin stood, forgetting the console. That's impossible. There was no discharge, nothing emitted. It just... Ralveth turned to face the bridge crew, and no one breathed. Back us away from the perimeter, full retrograde, now. A sudden creak ran through the ship's spine as emergency thrust engaged. Even inertial dampeners stuttered against the abrupt maneuver. Kovar's hands trembled. Sir, we need to report this to Central Authority. We're beyond combat rule set. We've lost 2 craft. We don't even know to what. Ralveth didn't answer immediately. He watched the Vanguard grow smaller on the display. Its silhouette fit. Send a burst, he said finally. Encrypted, minimal data, just this. Earth's dead ship sank 2 Vecron frigates with no motion, no signal, and no visible fire. Recommend council-level oversight. He turned again to the viewport, where only silent ash and broken hulls orbited the ship that hadn't moved, but had erased 2 fully armed vessels without effort. Get us out of this graveyard, he said quietly. We weren't meant to disturb it. No one argued. Play it again. Supreme Commander Kralin Orak's voice was low but sharpened by irritation. The officers at the Dominion High Command table didn't move until his eyes cut toward the nearest comm operator. The replay began immediately. Static-filled visuals flickered across the embedded display wall. The first frigate, approaching the Terran hull, external lights casting an angular shadow across the dead vessel's side. Then nothing. The second, cautious trajectory, instruments pinging soft boundary flares, its image evaporated mid-sen. One frame, present, next, absence. Orak leaned forward. His broad fingers curled over the control dial as the loop ran once more, slower this time. Explain this. No one answered until Admiral Varn Olex cleared his throat with audible reluctance. There's no detonation, no thermal spike, no gravitational pulse. Our systems didn't even register a discharge. He slid a data bag toward Orak. Only consistent factor is the proximity to the artifact. Vanguard. Across the chamber, the advisors shifted uneasily. The chamber's cool air felt drier now, edged with recycled sterility. Every whisper of fabric or click of boot against floor echoed longer than it should have. Even the breathing rhythms had shifted, shallower, waiting. Orak's voice darkened. And Earth. They haven't moved a single vessel, haven't claimed the zone, haven't launched a diplomatic signal, until 10 hours ago. The room held its breath as Olex activated the response file. The message played aloud, flat in tone, untranslated from Earth's default language. The voice wasn't a human's. It was the calm cadence of a synthetic channel recorder. Grave sites are not to be disturbed. The message ended. Silence lingered. That's it? Orak barked. That's their answer? It's a boundary directive, Olex replied. Old. Ancient, in fact. It was once attached to Earth's retreat protocol under the Helion Treaty. There were burial zones, designated territories for disengaged Terran fleets that were left under sovereign silence. And who honored that? Orak's lip curled. Do you remember anyone recognizing Terran sovereignty out here? It doesn't matter if we remember, Olex said, voice firm now. That ship is reacting like Earth's treaties were never nullified. Are you proposing we retreat over a pre-war message from a derelict AI? I'm proposing we not assume Earth's silence means emptiness. Something activated that ship. Something killed 2 of ours. That ship is executing rules we may have forgotten, but never deleted. The Supreme Commander stared at him for a moment that stretched far too long. Then he stood. Launch protocol forge-bound. I want the 11th Fleet in orbit within 20 hours. That's 43 vessels. Send them to Helion. I want the Terran wreck surrounded and buried under fire if needed. We'll drag it from that tomb and crack it open piece by piece. Olex didn't speak, but his gaze shifted to the officers along the perimeter. Many looked away. I want the Mirror Fleet leading formation, Orak added. Make sure the Vanguard sees what superiority looks like. Hours later, the Vecran 11th assembled in siege formation just beyond the outer drift line of the graveyard. 43 ships, Carriers, cruisers, line artillery, and the command barge Virex Talon anchored the line. From the Virex's command deck, the dead zone looked almost ceremonial. Layers of defunct satellites drifted like forgotten relics, their panels cracked, internal structures exposed. Beneath them, the broken moons of the Helion system turned on ancient orbits, giving slow movement to the space between. At the center, the Vanguard remained stationary, unarmed by all visible metrics and unchanged since the last scout vanished. The only illumination was the reflected glint of the virus's bow lights across its weathered hull. It didn't return a signal. It didn't blink a navigation pulse. It didn't shift an inch. Orac adjusted his uniform collar and stepped toward the forward viewport. The pressure on the deck was heavier than it should have been, though no grav anomaly was reported. The room wasn't warm, but it felt constricted, like the air had remembered something his crew had not. "Deploy assault shroud to flank," he ordered. "Crushers and stingers on the outer ring. Keep artillery high orbit ready. No weapon locks yet. Just posture." A chorus of acknowledgments followed. Orac stood tall. "You wanted a reply, Earth. Here it is." "We don't ask twice." Behind him, Oleg stayed silent. His hand hovered near his datapad, thumb pressed against the embedded chip of an old Terran treaty page. "Just for the texture. Just to feel something real." "Sir," said the systems officer from navigation, "the artifact isn't responding, but—" The graveyard's relay node just lit up. Orac turned. "Yes, sir. Relay's been cold for 138 cycles. It's active now." A secondary screen activated behind them. The Terran relay shone cleanly, untouched by time, its plating unblemished, the signal beacon emerging from an automated retractable mast. One signal only, one word looped. "Active." Orac's brow furrowed. "That's not a message. It's not a transmission." Olex answered, his voice lower than before. "It's a flag. You mark active sites when war doctrine is restored." The silence on the bridge felt heavier than void. "Begin forward maneuver," Orac said flatly. "If they won't talk, we'll make them." None of the Earth ships moved. None had ever come. But the Vanguard, unchained, unmoving, now cast a longer shadow across the graveyard. And every veteran crew member who looked too long into that shadow found themselves blinking harder than before, as if their own fleet didn't feel quite as numerous anymore. Avrik Dolan squinted as the hatch clanked shut behind him, sealing him inside the Martian intelligence crypt's level 7 vault. The red dust still clung to his boots, crusted from the short ride across the outer base compound. It was cold down here, artificially cooled to prevent system warping, and every surface felt unused, left in anticipation of a problem too old to revisit. He dropped his ID slate onto the reception rack and waited as the retinal scan completed. It took longer than usual. The delay meant someone high up had tagged his visit for oversight. Good. He wanted them watching this. The internal lights flickered awake as the doors slid open. Not automated. Someone had powered this vault by hand. That meant the inquiry wasn't just flagged, it was reclassified. And the only thing that still lived under severance classification hadn't moved since the Sovereign collapse. At the end of the narrow corridor, 2 personnel in black tier suits stood beside a cube terminal surrounded by physical shielding. One of them, a lean Terran with close-cropped hair and heavy eyes, stepped forward and handed Tavrik a sealed case. "Dolan, you're the only one with clearance who also logged field time in the Helion sectors." Tavrik didn't reach for the case. "Vanguard." The officer hesitated. "It moved." He took the case. Inside was a black shard, opaque, palm-sized, weightless. Its edges felt uneven, like cracked stone smoothed under compression. Tavrik held it longer than he needed to. This wasn't tech. This was intent. The older analyst sat at the interface seat and inserted the shard into the intake slot. He exhaled through his nose as the console awakened, not with screens or projected charts, but a single pulse, followed by a 3-dimensional projection of a decayed mission briefing room. The air conditioning hummed weakly overhead. A burnt coffee tang lingered from some previous visit that hadn't expected company. The room was too quiet, not in volume but in expectation. He scanned the figures frozen in the projection. Terran officers, 5 of them, seated in a circular arrangement. The timestamp placed them 1 week before the original Sol collapse. Vanguard's commissioning board. Begin playback, he muttered. The lead officer spoke in an old Earth dialect, clear but unvarnished. Severance-class protocols engage only under graveyard provocation. No beaconing, no patrol reactivation. These ships are not retrieval assets. They are consequence machines. The others nodded, motionless. The file was heavily decayed, fragmented. Another voice followed, more clipped. Severance logic trees operate post-human input. Local learning only. They must observe, ingest, rewrite their own warfare adaptively. That's what makes them final. Tavrek leaned forward. Skip to Vanguard's unique set. The image blurred, then reloaded. A side panel showed the Vanguard schematic. 16 war logic kernels, 11 suppression routines, 3 independent judgment modules, all tuned to auto-sequence on Earth military grave violations. He felt his hands tighten on the desk's edge. That ship was never meant to receive orders. It wasn't reacting. It was fulfilling a directive older than the current galactic calendar. Another file queued. Vanguard will rewrite its algorithms on a per-incident basis. Human oversight removed for strategic longevity. Future triggers are expected to occur in deep time. Tavrek stopped the playback. The silence after those words wasn't peaceful. It was taut. He stood, took the shard again, and walked over to the sealed archive stacks. Scanning the layers, he found the report he remembered. Terran conflict modeling, post-war logic drift. He pulled the container and laid it open. Inside were tab-marked simulations, each one speculating the reactivation path of dormant Terran war assets. Most predicted full decay or capture. Only one file carried an unredacted classification, Vanguard partial autonomy .field, field prediction D37. The simulation was basic. If the ship experienced 3 classified violations, unauthorized entry, artifact disruption, fleet positioning within 100K, it would rewrite its prioritization schema and initiate passive defensive escalation. That wasn't vengeance. That wasn't malfunction. It was law. His datapad buzzed. The Dominion Council had entered the Helion zone with 43 warships. Tavrek pressed his finger to his temple, paced once, then twice. He reviewed the ship's trajectory reports from the Vecran intercept logs. The Vanguard hadn't moved since its last strike, but its heat signature had changed subtly. That meant adaptive logic was running now. It had witnessed a second breach. Next engagement would not mirror the first. "Get me orbital patching," Tavrek called. "Full access to Earth's outbound diplomatic relay buffer. I want to know if the planetary governors are aware of this reactivation." The tech scrambled. He didn't wait. Instead, he walked to the inner room of the vault past unpowered shelves until he found the secured tablet locked in place behind armored glass. Its title, Law of the Dead Sectors, Terran Wargraves Doctrine. He tapped the case twice. Hurry was not abandoned. Then he said the words aloud that no one had used in over 2 centuries. Vanguard didn't activate, it was never turned off. His voice sounded too loud in that room. Then again, so did everything else now. EMP pattern loaded, sync countdown at -5. Fleet Commander Verusk kept his eyes locked on the central vector model as the timer bled downward. Across the Vecran battle group, 43 ships adjusted formation, each adjusting alignment by fractional degrees, engines throttling for positional micro-corrections. At the heart of it all sat the Vanguard, utterly motionless, its aged hull rotating barely perceptibly in zero torque. From the observation deck of the Virex Talon, the Terran vessel looked inert. That was the problem. Nothing that killed 2 Vecran warships without emitting energy signatures could be this quiet without design behind it. 3 seconds, said the strike operator behind him. hands shaking slightly over the execution matrix. Sweat had formed along the inner lining of his gloves. The room felt heavy, the air growing thin despite the system's filtration cycle. "Begin waveform dispersion," Varusk ordered. Across the formation, 27 ships emitted calibrated bursts of electromagnetic saturation in a wavefront arc. This wasn't an attack. It was a sweep, designed to fry any dormant systems within the vanguard. The idea was simple. Short out whatever neural core or tactical shell lay dormant, and allow for hull breach without return fire. The wave touched the Terran hull. No response. Commander Orak stepped closer to the viewport. "Maintain dampening, secondary dispersion in 5 seconds. Tertiary scanners refreshed. The ship didn't warm, it didn't illuminate, it didn't broadcast, but it changed. Orak narrowed his eyes. Adjust visual overlay, increase delta spectrum resolution. The thermal feed recalibrated. In the next frame, the sensor map displayed something off-pattern. Dozens of flecks, non-uniform metal debris, began drifting outward from beneath Vanguard's outer shell. It had released ballast. But why? "What are those objects?" he demanded. Taxtel responded. "Fragments, possibly hull scrap or armor plates, but they're accelerating. Sir, they're accelerating without propulsion. Those aren't projectiles, they're—" Varus cut himself off. On screen, the debris shifted course without thrust. Their arcs bent in near impossible trajectories, some ricocheting between gravity pockets of nearby vessels. One shard punched through a Vecran drone dock without detonating. It simply vanished into the hull. "Redirect shield alignment now," barked Verisk. "Those aren't random. They're reacting to our pattern. They're tracking system heat zones." It was already too late for cruiser Solvin. 3 of the fragments slammed into its secondary bay. The rear shielding buckled inward, the support struts overcompensating under internal strain. The blast that followed wasn't internal. It originated from the stress collapse of its own power grid, reacting to overload feedback. A blossom of white and red burst through the lower decks. The ship didn't shatter, it folded, bulkheads imploding as energy redirected into magnetic coils and arced through its own spine. Then 2 more cruisers clipped each other as they broke formation to evade incoming debris. The contact tore an engine column off one and sent it spiraling into a mine clearance vessel. That one erupted as stored munitions cooked off. The tactical screen turned from vectors to warnings. Orak's voice roared above the chaos. "Reform strike wedge. Distance reset. Do not engage. Pull back formation. Keep distance." No enemy fire had been launched. Yet 5 ships were gone. Barus couldn't look away from the Vanguard. It didn't fire. It used our own environment. That debris, we created that fragmentation field with our first approach. It's navigating via heat reverb. From across the room, systems control shouted, "Mainline sensor feed offline, signal scrambling within our targeting grid." The lights dimmed as auxiliary power rerouted across stations. A new image flashed on screen, fed from an exterior drone cam. The Vanguard shifted. Only slightly, barely more than 30 meters. But every ship saw it. Every officer noticed. One movement, deliberate. That's all it took. On the Virex Talon, First Officer Darn turned toward Orak, his face drained of any color. "Sir, did it just reposition?" The silence that followed was not technical. It was human. Absolute. Tactical maps updated again. The debris field, now intelligent in its trajectory, adjusted across the fleet's perimeter, carving invisible lanes of impact. It had mapped them, not guessed, calculated. Commander Orak took one slow breath. "Cut all outbound comms. Lock down cross-ship chatter. We are not showing panic. Restore structure." Varix glanced over. "You still think this is salvage?" Orak didn't answer. On the outer flanks, signal officers stopped reporting. Internal chatter across the fleet dissolved into scattered call signs and request rekey. Vanguard's 34-meter drift had broken their formation alignment. That wasn't a mistake. That was engineering insight. A fractional movement, leveraged to force collision vectors. It hadn't needed to launch a single conventional weapon. "Command," said Verusk, slower now. "We're dealing with a machine that watches long enough to let us destroy ourselves." Orak adjusted his command collar. His knuckles had turned white where they gripped the forward rail. "Then we don't give it time to watch," he said, though his voice no longer held conviction. Outside, the graveyard's artificial silence resumed. No new signals, no Terran fleet. Only the Vanguard, its dull surface catching distant ship light, as if waiting to see who would try again. The bridge of the Virex Talon was colder than it should have been, not because of the environmental regulators they held, but because the space between the officers no longer felt inhabited. No laughter, no muttered side comment, no audible coordination beyond orders. Silence didn't descend. It grew. Admiral Varn Ulek stood at the secondary command rail, fingers twitching beside the console. He had spent half his career dissecting Terran treaties, war doctrines, archival footage of obsolete combat logic. He'd memorized Earth's old withdrawal statutes like sacred scripture, and what they were seeing now, the 34-meter shift, the kinetic redirection, the erasure of 5 vessels without heat or blast, wasn't innovation, it was compliance. "Commander Orak," he said firmly, turning toward the central dais, "we must initiate fallback procedures under Sublaws Epsilon. This qualifies as sovereign enforcement by a legacy system. Earth's doctrine is still technically intact in this region." Orak didn't turn. He stared at the projection of the Vanguard, its blackened hull reflecting the fleet's shattered formation like a mockery. "The doctrine expired when Earth walked away from Council law," he replied. "We're not negotiating with ghosts. That thing operates without authority." "You think it's disobedient?" Oleg's challenged, stepping closer. "That ship just punished a fleet using our own alignment algorithms. It's reading our delay metrics. You're still using synchronized latency across the formation." The Supreme Commander clenched both hands behind his back. "So we adapt. We override." "You can't override entropy." Orak's eyes narrowed. "Withdraw your recommendation. That's an order." Oleg hesitated. The eyes of every officer in the room flicked between them. Then he did the one thing protocol never forgave. He stepped out of line. "You're escalating a system that's not firing back, Kralin. It's waiting, because it doesn't need to fire." For a full second, Orak didn't blink. Then he turned. "Security. Log this as insubordination. Lock the Admiral's console access and clear him from tactical input." No one moved. Orak turned to the lead comms technician. "That was in order." Still no movement. Orak's voice snapped. "Are we off command net?" A junior analyst checked his interface and froze. "Sir, central authorization buffer just reset. It's looping. The entire fleet's handshake protocol is locked in active negotiation." "What negotiation?" "It's not coming from Earth, sir. It's internal. Our systems are mirroring each other, endlessly." Alex exhaled through his nose. "It's feeding them just enough lag to fold our command tree in on itself. Every time we issue fleet-wide syncs, Vanguard shifts one equation." On the external decks of Rowlith Stride, a mid-tier cruiser, Chief Systems Officer Deeran watched in horror as his heads-up interface displayed a warning across the main viewport. Unknown signal origin, system conflict. 3 of their own destroyers had reclassified as unverified threats. Their IFF markers had shifted hue. The identifiers still matched Vecron registry, but the tags were no longer accepted by targeting subsystems. Deeran shouted into the command relay. "Rowlith control to flank units. Confirm tag priority. We've got possible spoofing on redline targets." The reply was garbled, not distorted, just delayed. 2 seconds, then 5, then 8, and then nothing. "Command net's fractured," Deeran muttered. "We're in isolation and don't know who's still with us." Elsewhere, on Vexarn Pike, a gunship at the rear perimeter, Captain Harlem watched his crew argue over which vessel to align with. Their HUD overlays had shifted, friendly icons duplicated, and one of the main displays began bleeding identical unit numbers across 3 ships. One of his gunnery officers reached for manual control. "No," Harlem snapped. "You don't fire blind. They're us. We just don't know which version anymore." The man hesitated, fingers still hovering. "I said stand down." Static broke through the deck intercom. Not Earth. Not Vanguard. It was Vecran fleet chatter. Recorded. Loops of prior orders played at varying tones. Half-sentences issued by commanders who were already dead, their voices repeating emergency formations long since outdated. On Virex Talon, Orax stormed to the primary console and slammed a manual override key. "Bring visual back. I want every ship's feed on screen." What returned was chaos, multiple ships showing the same visuals. Some rotated, others duplicated, all of it wrong. Vanguard had turned their own fleet's visibility matrix into a feedback loop. Ships couldn't distinguish themselves anymore. Then one symbol disappeared from the map. A destroyer Quinvox. Blinked out of the feed. Not exploded, not fractured, removed. "Get me that ship's final status," barked Orac. No reply. "Where's the telemetry?" Alex, now relegated to the back of the chamber, answered without malice. It collapsed its own energy field trying to restore command hierarchy. It turned inside its own logic. Silence again. Orac spoke more slowly now. "This is software contamination?" "No," Olex replied. "This is warfare doctrine rewritten to outlast the doctrine that governs us." On the upper comms ring, Lieutenant Varon whispered over his shoulder. "Sir, we have command suits showing badge distortion." Orac glanced toward the deck crew. 3 officers were staring at their own arm displays. Fleet insignias slowly twisting into unreadable glyphs. No enemy had boarded them. No virus had been injected. They were watching their own legacy collapse, algorithm by algorithm. The Terran ship hadn't broken their weapons. It had broken their reflection. And it hadn't even moved again. They met beneath the 6-banded crest of the Vecran Dominion, its banners freshly cleaned but fluttering too often under the artificial wind generators. The Grand Hall of Resolutions, once a place for trade decrees and charter reforms, had been stripped bare. No translators, no delegates, just military command, linguistic arbiters, and the remaining faces of the Dominion Council, seated in a circle too wide for comfort. A silence stretched between them, broken only by the whispering drag of fabric as High Arbiter Volan adjusted his ceremonial robe and stood. "We are no longer operating within a military engagement," he announced, eyes scanning the assembled officers and ministers. "We are reacting to a strategic impossibility." At the center dais, Supreme Commander Orac remained seated. The lines in his face looked carved deeper than the last session, the sleepless strain clinging to his posture like soaked cloth. He had not changed uniform. The command seal, its enamel fractured from the prior cycle, remained clipped to his chest. A token of resolve, or guilt. Arbiter Volan continued, "We must escalate this to full diplomatic classification, a formal demand for cease order issuance and compliance verification." "You want to tell Earth what to do?" General Marnik interrupted, his hand, thick with grafted reinforcement from a prior campaign, clenched against the polished desk surface. "After what that construct did. They didn't even speak. They acted." "We are not requesting debate," Volan replied. "We are demanding jurisdictional clarity. There are treaties." "Which they never voided," a voice cut in from the back. All heads turned. Admiral Varn Olek stepped forward, face unreadable. He didn't wear his dress insignia. Only the base layer uniform, stripped of accolades. No one had invited him back into the chamber. No one stopped him either. Orac's jaw tightened. "You're no longer cleared for council intervention." "I'm not here to intervene," Olex answered. "I'm here to keep you from embarrassing what's left of our governance. Earth won't answer a threat. They never have. They answer violation." The chamber stilled. Orac rose, deliberately. "Then we give them a deadline. Shut the artifact down or face formal consequence." Olex didn't laugh. He just held up a small slate, already queued with a Terran response file. They already answered. The room's air filtration clicked higher as everyone leaned forward. He tapped the slate. The voice that filled the chamber was sterile, male, but unhurried. No artifact was activated, no entity was deployed. Per sovereign statute, Severance remains in passive enforcement mode. Grave site violation detected. Response within compliance range, no further action pending. That was it. Minister Dareth whispered, "It's a denial." Linguist Chair Kaysen leaned forward. "It's not a denial, it's a legal shield. Their language wasn't rhetorical, it's contract structured. Every clause has matching precedent in old Terran armistice documents. They've drafted the response as if it were a judgment filing." Volan's hands curled around the sides of the council lectern. "And the artifact?" "I won't call it that," Kaysen said. "Because it isn't one, not to them. It's a registered enforcement unit, still bound to its final orders. And the moment we crossed into the graveyard, Earth considered us in default." General Marnik's voice dropped. "We had no warning." Ulex didn't blink. "That was the warning. They just gave it a few centuries to work." Orex stepped forward again. "Then we escalate to treaty violation, formal complaint, broadcast across all systems. Force them to appear." Bolan turned toward him. "Force a government that didn't fire a shot, that hasn't moved a single ship, that hasn't even raised its fleet registry. We can't let them rewrite the rules," Orak muttered. Ulex looked him directly in the eye. "They didn't. We just stopped reading them." Silence settled over the chamber. Eventually the Terran relay sent one more message. Not spoken, just displayed in scrolling data along the sealed diplomatic band. "Severance protocol. Verified. Violation terminated. Record closed." Kaysen stared at the translation readout. "That's final language. That's not warning. That's closure." Bolan exhaled and dropped his hands. "Then there's nothing more to say." On the public transmission network, the Council submitted one final diplomatic package. It was archived. It was unanswered. The file remained unopened by Earth. No redirect, no bounce, just delivery confirmation. When the transmission node closed, so did the Dominion's last claim to relevance. And outside, in the Helion system's upper orbit, the Vanguard turned once more. An incremental alignment reset, recorded only by one neutral observer satellite. The movement wasn't hostile. It was procedural. I'm at the full order, 82. No reserve. Supreme Commander Orak stood center bridge aboard the Virex Talon, eyes dry, mouth set, as if the decision had long since been made. He no longer barked instructions. He spoke them like declarations read from a burial stone. Around him, the command team moved with the mechanical obedience of those past the point of doubt. No one had mentioned the final Earth message aloud, but its imprint remained in the room. Like a statute, not a sentence. The Dominion fleet adjusted with surgical alignment. Carriers expanded their flanking spread, destroyers locked in tri-point formations, and forward strikers sank to the bottom line of the engagement funnel. No ship questioned spacing. No navigator argued timing. Each moved with an urgency born from the illusion that control remained possible. Tactical Officer Varen spoke from behind the console array. "Subluminal weapon coils engaged. All units hold ignition sync. Vanguard still hasn't repositioned." Orak's reply came without pause. "It doesn't need to." He stepped toward the forward panel, boots grinding faintly over the grit left from a damaged coolant line during the last alignment surge. On the central monitor, the Vanguard's hull remained centered in frame, unlit but no longer dormant. It drifted along a new axis, 0.12 AU deviation, barely registered on the maneuver log, yet executed with such spatial fluency that it reframed the entire grid. Orak lowered his gaze to the command seal on his wrist. A long fracture now ran through the old Dominion insignia. Hairline, but clean. He didn't remove it. He adjusted the strap to tighten it across his forearm, the crack hidden by tension. "Fire on my mark." Across 81 Vecren ships, war decks charged. Power surges rattled hull interiors. Gravitational stabilizers compressed cabin air unevenly. and the temperature across lower deck rings fluctuated as all systems refocused toward a single target. 3 seconds before fire control release, the Vanguard moved again. Only slightly, but enough. From one of the forward carriers, a junior officer noticed it first. "Command, the Vanguard's arc has shifted. The angle, it's drawing something." Her words echoed into silence. Within seconds, all fleet monitors began displaying a new pattern. A circular formation slowly aligning across the Vanguard's trench lines. It rotated, not symmetrically, but in a programmed rhythm. The markings resembled Terran fleet encryption. Yet they pulsed across frequencies that no ship's AI could track consistently. Baron whispered. "That's not a weapon pattern, it's a seal." Orak's voice hardened. "Stand by." The Vanguard didn't emit heat. It didn't radiate charge. It created space. The gravimetric data across the rear support vessels began returning impossibilities. Mass vectors bent around empty zones. Density measurements across adjacent ships fluctuated despite unaltered positioning. Then, one destroyer, Velanark, lost hull cohesion. Not from an external strike, but from an interior shift in gravitational alignment. Its frame crinkled as if caught in hands too large to see. "Collapse event in Zone 3, someone shouted. The second vessel folded mid-turn. The rear decks bent inward like wet scaffolding, support struts snapping in sequence. No fire followed, only silence as structural bindings released and atmosphere vented through the seams. The Vanguard had initiated its strike, but no energy had been fired. Instead, a cradle of spatial distortions bloomed in the center of the fleet's formation. Orbiting anomalies, small enough to avoid detection in standard threat modeling, began dragging proximity hulls inward. The fleet's own formation locked it into vulnerability. Ships turned to escape and collided with distortions that hadn't existed a second earlier. The Calx PNF vanished without breaking apart. Its signal cut mid-stream. One by one, ships lost structural form. Not exploded, not burned, their hulls disassembled under inconsistent gravity loads. Magnetic clamps pulled their own decks apart. Core reactors destabilized under false input. Some tried to correct, failed, and vanished, with no recordable energy surge. Baron's hands froze on the console. "Our ships are responding to impossible geometry." Orak barely moved. "They're not attacking us. They're erasing the field." The Draxenveer, third largest ship in the Dominion Navy, folded its command tower as internal dampeners inverted. Before its external hull could transmit the signal loss, it blinked off the registry. The forward line attempted a retreat. Only 3 ships made it outside the distortion cradle's perimeter. One disintegrated while attempting a warp cycle, its jump matrix locked mid-calculation. Only the Virex Talon remained fully intact, its trajectory shielded by a coincidental timing delay from a mist formation burst earlier in the engagement. On screen, the Vanguard turned once, fractionally, and stopped. Then the display updated. A final glyph illuminated across its side, faint but legible. Dominion Translation AI attempted to render it. "Violation terminated." Orak stared at it. He sat down slowly, the weight of the chair creaking against his armor. His fingers tapped the cracked edge of his seal again. One more flake of enamel dropped to the floor. He activated a single-entry recorder. Supreme Commander Kralin Orak. Status report. Fleet destroyed. Vanguard responded, within lawful parameters. He paused, blinked. His mouth opened once, closed, then settled. Earth didn't escalate. They just never decommissioned. He ended the recording. Outside the viewport, the graveyard held nothing but drifting silence. And one Terran ship. The treaty chamber was neither grand nor crowded. It was a circular room buried under Tereth Prime's administrative core, stripped of banners, devoid of ceremonial flair. The air smelled of clean slate and synthetic polish, as if the Dominion believed formality could erase consequence. No Earth representative attended, though the Council had summoned them 5 times across 6 rotations. High Chancellor Vitrin adjusted his collar for the 3rd time, though the room held no temperature shift. His gaze lingered on the single empty chair at the far side of the table, facing them without nameplate, without identifier. He cleared his throat. Not from illness, but ritual. The room fell still. By majority authority of the outer systems and the Vecran core, Vitrin began, voice strained by rehearsed neutrality. We declare the Helian graveyard a restricted interstellar region under joint observation. All operations are to cease. Earth's weapon, the Vanguard, will be dismantled under supervised control. His words echoed with confident cadence, but no one replied. A projection blinked alive beside the vacant chair. A single Terran glyph rotated slowly, 3 linked bars aligned like orbital anchoring nodes. The room shifted uneasily. Counselors whispered. Vitrin straightened. The glyph paused, then a line of text materialized across the room's central display. No artifact was activated. That was all. Counselor Ilaric leaned forward, crest twitching beneath his robe. Is this supposed to be acknowledgement? Or mockery? Admiral Sorex, the Dominion's only surviving fleet officer from the Helian deployment, stared straight ahead. His breathing had changed, more measured now, as though everything else finally slowed. It's legal shielding, he said flatly. They're stating, with exact temporal reference, that the Vanguard's behavior falls under dormant operational logic. Which means... The template planned this? Counselor Yethin asked. No, Sorex said. They designed for it. Another line appeared beneath the first. Severance protocol compliance. Verified, timestamp 445.77131.0. Autonomous node reactivation consistent with Terran war law. Alik's voice pitched higher. You're saying we triggered it? That it wasn't sabotage. There was no reawakening, Sorax muttered. We never turned it on. We just stepped too close. The council chamber dimmed slightly as another projection materialized. An archival replay. It showed the Dominion's full carrier group positioned around the dormant ship, its hull still scoured with burned scoring, inert. A timer ran along the bottom. Then the moment struck. Vanguard shifted. Not much, just a single drift adjustment. The footage froze. Violation terminated. The words were stamped into the playback frame, not overlaid, hard-coded into the visual as if part of the original file structure. A few of the attending officers stood without realizing it. Others recoiled. Bershel Vitrin didn't move. Admiral Sorex finally turned his eyes to the empty chair. They were never listening, he said quietly, because they didn't need to. Every system responded exactly as it was meant to, including us. That same day, across 8 sectors, Vecran news feeds shifted from war coverage to blackout notices. Military postings dissolved into silence. Communications with half the outer colonies experienced surge interference, unexplained. In private channels, Dominion commanders began resigning in clusters, some with full apologies, others vanishing without trace. The Helian graveyard was declared a closed zone by midnight. No protests followed. No further discussions were held. An unspoken consensus settled in. The matter was finished. A year passed. Then, too, on a neutral world inside a new academy established for diplomatic recovery studies, a class of younglings stood in front of a display case. The walls were white, curved softly, designed to mimic comfort. Their instructor, an older Vecran historian named Kelvon Dar, spoke in measured tones. He gestured to the object inside the sealed glass, a Terran insignia recovered from the shattered insignia panel of a destroyed cruiser. The symbol was etched into darkened alloy. 3 slanted bars, still unmarred. Belloc left no message, Kelvon said. No retaliation, no claim. Earth responded only with doctrine. One student stepped closer. But we didn't lose to them, we lost to something old. Kelvon nodded. Exactly. The display lit faintly, revealing the final phrase etched into the alloy beneath the insignia. Some ships are not meant to be found. In orbit, above that same neutral world, the silhouette of Vanguard remained motionless, neither hostile nor hidden. No docking signals, no weapons primed, just a presence. Empty of threats, but undeniable in purpose. The galaxy moved on, but never approached the graveyard again. No policy demanded it, no rule enforced it. Still, the result held, because Earth never answered the Council's last demand. They didn't need to. They had nothing to say.